You don't know what I did to the kitchenette yet, do you?
Welcome back to Q-Dads. Waffles at the ready as yes, Severance finally returned to our screens, and how great it is to see our four characters once again. And of course, we've got some big questions that need to be answered. Like, is Helly actually an outie? And why is Miss Huang a child? Of course, we also learn more about the background and the 206 countries that Lumon operates in. So, how does this work? And obviously, the big question on mine and Ben's mind is what is going on with Gemma / Miss Casey? As we both have massive theories, but completely different. So, we'll timestamp it, but it will be towards the end. So, stick around for that, or skip there now if you really want to know why me and Ben have this big disagreement. Ben basically said I was crazy and clearly I'm not watching the same show as him. So let us know your thoughts on the theory when you get there. So we're going to be looking at all these details and giving you our theories for this season. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button because we'll be keeping you up to date all things Severance for probably the next 2 months. So obviously the episode ends with our four reunited and tapping away at their screens as they continue with the refinement of macro data. But I must point out here that it seems Mark is now analysing these numbers through a different emotion that feels more like hope than fear, or a sense of uncertainty about the numbers as he did before. Obviously now he's trying to piece together the puzzle of Gemma and Miss Casey as almost a version of his outside self and inside self become one. Mark is obviously destined to try and free Miss Casey from here and get her back to the real world of becoming his wife on the outside, which subconsciously he probably knows, and this is why we're having that weird moment of hating the company but also wanting to work with them for the greater good. I think it's actually a really interesting development that might alter the way they work in the series. Obviously we have the four of them reunited. Now as they all told their stories, we obviously got one person who didn't tell the truth. And we have to ask ourselves why. Is this for possibly two reasons? The first being the fact that Ellie did not want to upset the dynamic of the current team by saying the fact she is an Egan, which of course would make sense and may backfire in the future. Or we have the possibility that she is in fact an outie, and the reason why she's lying is because she doesn't quite know all the details as to what the innie did, and of course doesn't want them to know about this. We did get the news that Milchek is not severed and only works in the severed department, meaning that they aren't against having someone from the outside in the department. So for me, there has to be some ulterior motive for Ellie, as why would her outie give up 8 hours of her day for Ellie to be there? Or she could just be an outie as she's playing a game of trying to uncover more about what Lumon is hiding in the background on a mission to make it a better company. We don't know what Lumon really do. Maybe her father has kept her in the dark too. Maybe she also wants to learn the truth. This thought does lead into my theory later on too. Of course, she could also be trying to turn the four of them against each other in hopes to sever all negative thoughts about the company. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on whether you think Ellie is a normal innie or in fact she is a outie. Of course, for me the episode was great with lots of new details such as a jar of pennies that seemed to be on display and makes no sense like everything else in Lumon. Also, the intro to the show with the chaotic exploration of the office as Mark searches for Miss Casey was great. Superbly filmed. And one of the other details that I did like was the whole new introduction video that seemed to have recordings of their voice and obviously some weird animated footage of them. But this just shows that Lumon is watching every single thing they do and no conversation is safe. Now, if they're going to be showing this video to every single employee, that means everyone will know who these four are and ultimately they will become famous within Lumon. One of the other details mentioned here is there are 206 countries that form part of the Lumon group. Could this be where our Italian employee transferred from? A department where everything was run by brooms. Now, we did see some of these new characters within the floor, with Gwendolyn and Mark being from MDR Department 5X, which was the purple room we saw in the first kind of few minutes of the episode, meaning that actually, as Mark appeared on another floor where different people exist. But this could not have happened because he went to check the wellness centre, which looked pretty similar other than the walls now being fully partitioned. And this makes me ask the question that actually with all the corridors being such a labyrinth, do other departments exist within the same floor and have always been there? There's a few other details I haven't touched on, such as the fact that Mark managed to communicate with the board Now, what consequences is that going to have moving forward? Of course, we then have Mrs. Huang, who I'm not sure is legally allowed to be there, as she's a child. There are a few theories around her, potentially having the consciousness of someone else. Maybe Miss Casey. Who knows? Maybe she's just an authoritative child. Maybe she's too an Egan and her family members have died, resulting in her no longer having a family and having to be severed. We're going to dive deep into that in a separate video. Now, talking about Miss Huang actually leads me on to my theory and where Ben and I have massive differing opinions. So his take on what's happening is roughly this. I'm paraphrasing as he's already dropped 2 videos on Severance and talks about his theories. So he thinks Miss Casey / Gemma, whichever one you want to use here, is fully alive and chose to leave Mark, or has potentially been kidnapped and is being forced to work for Lumon. He said maybe she's having her memories wiped, hence they need to keep taking her back to test him. He believes Mark is almost merging with his severed brain and outie brain subconsciously in an effort to find Miss Casey. Hence why they showed us the bloke in the first season who had both innie and outer memories in his head. And as that subplot seemed to have just disappeared for a bit, Ben thinks that could tie back to how Mark is reacting now. Now we have Ben's boring but probably realistic theory out the way. Let's talk about my much better one. So we're told in the first season that Gemma was in a car crash and died. And this seems to be what everyone knows. Hence, this is why Mark became severed. Now, my take on this is possibly Gemma might be brain dead and Lumon somehow got her body. She could have donated it to science, for example. Either way, Lumon have found a way to implant a severed memory into it. My slightly wilder theory is somehow Gemma was severed prior to the accident and they have made some kind of artificial body to put the memories in, and that's why they experimented showing Mark to her to see if it would spark some kind of life. Another thing that made me think this might be the case is the ending scene where we see Mark put the numbers in the box. Just after it cuts to a shot of Gemma's face and we see the 68% completed text. Now, this is showing us Mark's quota, but what if it's also the percentage relating to the part of Gemma / Miss Casey's brain? And the work Mark and the team have been doing is to map or fix a human brain, ultimately actually making Lumon not as bad as we think they are. This also leads me on to Miss Huang. Could she be in a similar situation, or are they able to create bodies? Could she actually be the mind from Miss Casey's innie? It does seem far-fetched, but why is there a child there? As I mentioned earlier on, you would have to give up 8 hours of your day to be here at Lumon, so that child would no longer be getting any form of education. Also, to try and back up my theory a little bit, in season 1, Miss Casey says she's only been awake for a few hours, the time she spent with Mark basically, showing they only keep her awake for so long. That doesn't explain Miss Huang though, unless they've perfected the technique. Let us know your thoughts and theories on this. Do you think either of us are right? Now, the final thing I want to talk about is Lumon and their change on things that makes no sense. In the first season, it's explained that people are severed to reduce external factors hindering their performance. So now, with them all seeing the outside and the fact other severed people inside of Lumon know they've been outside, it kind of now ruins the concept of motivation. Also, at the end of the episode, Dylan is shown a family meeting area, which I think is fully a lie. This would basically ruin the point of a severed person, as now they have outside influences. Also, the scene with Irv and Dylan made me question if Milchek is even telling the truth about Dylan having a wife when he told him it's his wife's name. Either way, it seems the team now would be less motivated to do the work. But saying that, as Lumon have said, they can leave when they want, does make me question if this is some form of new manipulation technique. And I would love to know what convinced the other outies, other than Mark, to return back to Lumon. It does seem really weird. Right, let us know your thoughts. This show is clearly a mind messer. So what do you think is happening? Are Miss Waig and Miss Casey people who have had brain trauma or something similar? And ultimately, what do you think Lumon's goal is? Thank you all for stopping by. We will be dropping the solo season final tomorrow, so look out for that. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, we'll catch you next time with something new.